Perfect. We'll start with a roll call. McKee here. Schultz. Here. Bottima. Present. Varenkamp.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
If you'd like to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Screwed me up.
I screwed myself up.
It's been a long day.
Agenda approval. Anything from staff? I know there's a couple.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There's a couple changes we have. I did want to note that we were not quite able to get the draft minutes ready, so we would like to ask to remove 7A. There was a clerical error on the title on the main page of the agenda for item 8C. It is an easement vacation, not a trail vacation. And then did want to see if council would consider item 10E, a sandblaster purchase for the city. So we
Okay.
that under new business.
Perfect. Anything from council? No. And I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended with the removal of 7A and the addition of 10E.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, commission representatives, we have Jay and Phil from Planning and Parks and Trails respectively, potentially.
Yes, Jay is joining us virtually, and I don't see Phil yet, but.
Tom Anderson can fill in. We got
We
a
do
Parks and
have the
Trails.
chair.
That works. Okay, then we'll go on to open forum.
Wonderful. Anyone wishing to speak on open forum? I have not received any cards, but if you'd like to speak on any items not on the agenda, we'd ask that you come up to the podium, state your name and address, and we'll take comments for up to 3 to 5 minutes, please. And then anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or click raise reactions and click raise your hand, and we can recognize you virtually. At this time here, no one is raising their hand, and
Okay. Still nothing? Okay. Then we'll go right on to the presentations. 6A, we have years of service recognition for Mike.
thank you, Mayor and Council. I am honored to recognize Mike Pritchard this evening. Mike has been with the city for 10 years. I've had joy of working with Mike. He has served as first as our code compliance official, and then transitioned in 2021 to our construction services coordinator. And Mike does everything. He's a jack of all trades and really is willing to help with any department. And so we've been really lucky to have Mike on the team. And Kevin might have a couple more comments. Anything else to add?
Sure, Mayor and Council, I just want to echo Jessica's statements. Couple of items I just want to highlight that Mike's now performing because he's done so many functions for us. So in his new role, he is really one of the folks who helps me with right-of-way management and some of the program visions that we have to develop. You know, it's been on one of our objectives for a while at a staff level to really enhance that and identify that and develop that as we grow. He's also primary providing daily oversight to the administration of our building official and anything building services related, which is a huge role and growing role. And I rely on him heavily for that and appreciate what he's given to the city. He also helps me with stormwater compliance and the MS4 permitting. That's ever increasing as we develop in Hennepin County and the state of Minnesota. And then he actually also is responsible at a small level for building maintenance around City Hall in addition to other things. And I really look forward and I'm excited to see how Mike can help us set a vision for how we handle all things permit related in the city. So with that, I want to thank him for 10 years and hopefully I can have him for another 10 years. So thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam.
Nice job, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. Mayor, can I tell a good Mike story?
Sure. Go for it.
So when I first moved into Corcoran, or was moving into Corcoran, we had some questions about what is this drainage utility easement on our property? And Mike was extremely helpful and professional, and it was really encouraging to see a member of the city staff who was so proactive and kind in his approach to just a new resident of the city. And it really speaks well of your attitude and the professionalism that you bring to what you do, and I'm really thankful that you approach your job in that way. So thank you, Mike.
Appreciate all you do.
Thank you.
Okay. Elm Creek Watershed, Ken? Floor is yours.
Mayor and council, thanks for letting me come back up and talk tonight for the audience's benefit. My name is Ken Genthner. I'm the Corcoran Commissioner on the Elm Creek Watershed Commission. And over the past few months, I've been coming up and giving presentations on various aspects of the Elm Creek Watershed and describing how its role impacts the community and how it interacts with the city government. And tonight, I'm going to try and keep it to about 10, and if somebody wants to start tapping when we get to about 9, that'll help me a little bit. But tonight I'd like to describe a couple of the major studies that the Elm Creek Watershed conducts that provides us data regarding the condition of the water resources in the watershed. And then I want to talk about 3 of the requests that I'm going to make to the council and explain what those requests are and why I'm making them. The 2 studies that I want to describe are called the Total Maximum Daily Load Study, and we'll get to the map in a minute. And then the second one is a sub-watershed assessment. The Total Maximum Daily Load Study is a study the watershed conducted in 2016. So backing up, the Federal Clean Water Act requires every state to identify all impaired waters within the state and establish maximum pollutant loads for those waters. This is a matter of federal law that trickles all the way down to the local level. So the states delegate responsibility to local water management organizations like the Elm Creek Watershed Management Commission to conduct these studies and set standards for total daily pollutant loads. The Elm Creek, and the study is called the Tmdl Study, Total Maximum Daily Load. The Elm Creek Tmdl Study quantifies the pollutant reductions needed to meet state water quality standards for impaired lakes and streams within the watershed. And the 3 primary pollutants addressed are phosphorus, E. coli bacteria, and suspended solids. Total suspended solids, TSS, and that's basically silt from runoff. The study also identifies mitigation strategies for protecting and restoring waterways in the watershed, including the creation of stormwater mitigation standards. These are the standards that the watershed applies when it reviews development applications. So the watershed is reviewing developer proposals for compliance with the standards and then handing off to you, the city council, to require compliance with those standards when you approve the development proposals. The standards that we apply then, that the watershed has adopted, then apply to all the municipalities within the watershed. So we're applying the same standards, Medina, Maple Grove, Plymouth, et cetera, et cetera. The study also adopts standards for siting and management of what are known as non-production livestock operations, hobby farms within the watershed. The study creates outreach strategies to existing farms, production operations, to promote voluntary best management practices. And I'll get into the distinction between active farms and hobby farms in a second. The study also identifies education strategies for informing urban residents on issues like use of non-phosphorus fertilizers, pet waste management, and establishing naturalized buffers adjacent to waterways. So there's also an education component that's addressed there. The Tmdl study, basically, now if you look at the map, took water quality data for 7 lakes within the sub-watershed, or within the watershed, excuse me, in Rogers, Dayton, and Maple Grove. And the lakes are not highlighted, but if you start at about 10 o'clock on the clock, Sylvan Lake, Holly Lake, Goose Lake, Rice Lake, Diamond Lake, Fish Lake were the lakes that were studied. And you'll notice that none of those lakes are in the city of Corcoran. The only lake in the city of Corcoran that's wholly in Corcoran is Jubert Lake in the southwest part of the city. And these are all shallow lakes, considered shallow lakes, and I don't recall the exact metric for that, but I believe they're something like 9 feet or less deep. Weaver Lake, by the way, is considered a deep lake, and that's not considered impaired. The study also took data from 15 creek monitoring stations, and these are stations that are maintained to measure pollutants and water volume. And there are 15 of them in the watershed, and they're not identified on that map. 2 are located in Corcoran. There's one on the South Fork of Rush Creek at 101 and Shannon Lane, where Rush Creek goes under 101. And then there's one on the North Fork of Rush Creek where it goes under Oakdale Drive. I don't know the specific location of that one. But what's relevant there is that there was very little actual physical monitoring taking place within Corcoran boundaries. Most of the test monitoring was taking place in Dayton, Rogers, and Maple Grove, and along Elm Creek in Medina. So the point there is, well, 2 things. The study identified substantial E. coli loads in both the North Fork and the South Fork of Rush Creek. It was identifying that at the creek monitoring stations, which are on Corcoran's borders. The study did not establish from any collected data, actual data, the E. coli, phosphorus, or suspended solid loads within Corcoran at any location. So if you're following me, we've got a lot of pollutants that are leaving Corcoran. We don't know at this point where they're being generated within Corcoran. The study did extrapolate, though, on the sources of the pollution. So the extrapolation occurred via a couple of means: mathematical modeling based on engineering data, water volumes, density of pollutants, and then extrapolating where those pollutants must come from and in what volumes, what sources. And basically, it's called aerial pictometry. So this is using Google Earth to do things like identifying barns, pastures, and then estimating number of livestock in those areas throughout Corcoran. Okay. So the Tmdl study itself is a very broad brush tool. The subwater assessments fill the data gaps and fine-tune mitigation strategies. So the Tmdl told us we have this overall pollution picture in the watershed. We think this is where it's coming from. Based on what we know, let's set baseline standards for mitigating or restoring the impacts of these pollutants, and that kind of drives everything from there. The subwatershed assessments, though, rely on actual data collection to fill out the information that we would need to know. So while we still have the picture up, what you'll see on the North Fork of, and I don't have the laser, I'm going to step around here.
We do have a whole bunch.
Thanks.
Actually, they don't
There's a button on the side.
work that well.
Okay.
Yours doesn't.
I'm going to step back here, actually, it's better. So you can see the North Fork of Rush Creek. The guide tells you that that's all considered a polluted and impaired waterway. Here's the South Fork. And you can see once we get down to roughly where Shannon Lane is, when you go upstream past City Hall and then down these 2 branches, there's really no data, and including Jubert Lake. There's one little reach of Elm that contributes to Elm Creek there. That's also significantly impaired. And that's what all the dots on that mean. It was at the time of the study. That's all. So the subwatershed assessments, there are 5 subwatersheds within the Elm Creek Watershed, and in Corcoran, they're the North Fork subwatershed and the South Fork Rush Creek subwatershed. So Jessica, if you put the second map up. By the way, there were only 2 maps, there weren't 3. I know the packet said there were 3. You can scroll up a little bit and rotate it there. Now maybe zoom out. So the brownish area is the North Fork subwatershed area, and the green area is the South Fork subwatershed area. When a subwatershed assessment is done, We conduct actual field data in order to specifically locate sources of pollutants and allow tailored mitigation strategies. A North Fork of the Rush Creek Sub-Watershed Assessment was conducted in 2018, and at the time it broke the watershed into 6, they're called management unit areas, and within each management unit identified the top 10 mitigation practices by cost effectiveness and pollutant load removal. So now we're saying we've identified specific areas that are contributing pollutants. What are the most cost-effective ways to reduce those pollutants within that area? Examples of the types of things that can be done are wetland restoration, grass waterways within farmed areas, elevated tile intakes within farmed areas, and there are a number of other projects that can be undertaken. I want to mention a project that Hennepin County has taken the lead on, and this involves the Stott Farms project on the west side of Jubert Lake. And this is the creation of managed drainage areas that ultimately drain water into Jubert Lake. This was a voluntary project undertaken by the property owner that'll serve as mitigation for the pollutants going into Jubert Lake. And this was a project that was identified via the sub-watershed assessment that was done in that area. And what I'd like to do at a future council meeting, maybe just include it in a packet for informational purposes, is the watershed's review of that project. And it actually doesn't come in front of you for approval, so you wouldn't have received it otherwise. But this is an example where Hennepin County Environmental, using the data from the sub-watershed assessment, connected with the private property owner, and together they devised a project that is also funded in part by grant money. So it's an example of how the process should work to improve some of those conditions. Those sub-watershed assessments are heavily subsidized by grant money and matching funds from the watershed, and Corcoran actually paid $500 towards that study to develop the specific information in the sub-watershed.
That was some shrewd bargaining.
It was some true bargaining. There was, the watershed wanted to see us participate in that project, and so it was felt that it was an appropriate thing to do. In 2018, Kevin sent a letter to the Elm Creek Watershed requesting that a South Fork sub-watershed assessment be included in the watershed's capital improvement plan. And I have that letter, and we can provide that to you if you're interested. At that time in 2018, the total cost of the study was projected to be $58,800. Out of that, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, a Minnesota agency, it's called Bowser, would have provided grant funding of $47,000 against the $58,000. The Elm Creek Watershed Commission itself would have funded $8,000 worth of the study, and then the cities within the sub-watershed would have had to fund $2,900. So out of that total $58,000 study cost, Corcoran would have funded $1,470. Medina would have done $700. Maple Grove would have done $700. And we didn't move forward on it for whatever reason. But that gives you a sense of how heavily subsidized these studies can be. The South Fork, so one of the requests that I have is that the city consider and ultimately agree to fund its portion of the sub-watershed assessment study for the South Fork of Rush Creek. And part of the reason for that is that it's my sense now, having participated in the watershed for the last few years, and knowing Corcoran, having been involved in city government here, that the likelihood that mitigation and restoration projects taking place in the South Fork watershed would probably gain traction more quickly. I think there probably more opportunity and there'd be more receptivity to doing projects there, whether that would be a wetland restoration or a creek bank restoration or whatever, or getting involved in helping private landowners on voluntary projects to do restorations. So the amount of the charge wouldn't be great. I know at some future point you're going to have a workshop on the idea of adopting a stormwater area charge. I think there's some dovetailing here, and when you do have that workshop, I'd like to maybe sit in on that and be a part of that discussion. And the other question that I have, and this would require a little research, is whether doing this type of research, if it can be tied out to public recreation space, is something that can be funded with park dedication funds. I don't know that answer. I'm just raising that as a possibility for maybe research. Because again, at the levels that we're talking about, whether it's funded out of just a public works operating budget or it comes out of a different type of fund, I don't think it's a large amount of money, but I think that the data it generates is really, really useful, and probably it can be recouped after doing one project, on the basis of one project. So that's the first part of the talk. One of the things that the Tmdl study did was it created a policy, general policy applicable to large animal and manure management within the watershed. And there's, well, I'll get back to the script a little bit. Just to remind everybody that the city itself does not have jurisdiction over statutory farm operations. Those are governed by state law. The city only has regulatory power over non-production or hobby farms, but that still represents a substantial number of large animals within the community. The Corcoran large animal ordinance historically only considered gross acreage in calculating the animal unit formula, and then applied lot line setbacks for shelters and manure piles. The watershed policy generated out of the Tmdl study incorporates wetland setbacks for both pasturing and manure storage, along with a CUP process to promote best management practices. Those are features that don't exist in the Corcoran ordinance, and they never have. The Elm Creek guideline policy generally only applies to newer expanded facilities, and now this relates to a project you'll be looking at later on tonight, the Bechtold Farms project. When that came for review at the watershed, it basically went through, there was nothing controversial about it. In the very last moment of discussion, one of the commissioners said, what about the manure ordinance? Are these going to be hobby farms on this project? And my response was, I have no idea, Kevin. It's not for us to know, or that's what they ultimately use on the parcels. I mean, that's up to the property owners. But it sort of begged the question, where is Corcoran at in terms of hobby farms? And because in my memory, we haven't had a development that involved potential hobby farms for so long, no one's really discussed that. So the watershed said, let's attach this recommended policy to the review, knowing that it doesn't have any regulatory impact. It can't, it's inconsistent with Corcoran's ordinance. Corcoran's ordinance would govern that project, so the watershed attaching that policy really doesn't have any impact on it. So when you see it, and Kevin, we talked about that a little bit, it's just sort of added information. But I think it's appropriate that we address that topic. So one of my requests tonight is that the council basically give me permission to meet with Kevin or Kendra to talk about modifications to large animal and manure aspects of our ordinance. And I'd like to involve two people from Hennepin Environmental, Kevin Ellis, who was the person that did all the legwork on the Joubert project, and then Paul Stewart, who is actually the extension agent, the farm extension agent for Hennepin County, to sit in on a staff level meeting and make some recommendations on how we could modify our large animal ordinance to consider wetland setbacks, to consider whether a CUP type of function would be useful to create more flexibility for people. So for example, if you want to have large animals but you've got wetland issues, by a CUP you can go ahead and have the animals, but you have to demonstrate that you're going to use best management practices for pasturing and manure management. And that would just be, recommended ordinance change. The council then would obviously review it, discuss it, decide what they want to do with it. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was, again, I'm going to pound the drum a little bit, that as the city expands its staff to manage the new city water facility, that it consider a surface water technician role within the city. This would be somebody who could serve as a liaison with the Elm Creek Watershed, who would basically be responsible for knowing what grant funding is out there for private property owners for city projects, and at some point would probably relieve Kevin of some of his duties with respect to the watershed. As the department grows and city activity grows, you'll probably want somebody else to do surface water. So as you go through your staffing, I've mentioned it a couple of times, I would simply ask that you keep that in mind. The next time I come back, for my final presentation, I want to talk about the watershed's budget, how the watershed funds itself, and what the grant opportunities are for both public and private projects for mitigation and restoration.
Sounds good.
That's it. Went more than 10, sorry.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Any questions or feedback or thoughts? I will, so on the sub-watershed assessment, I asked the city to consider funding it. I did ask Kevin to get in touch with Diane Spector, who's at Stantec, to talk about the updated numbers. If we were to commit to that, for example, if the city in its upcoming budget wants to carve out some funding to pay its portion of that, what would the study cost? We have the 2018 numbers. We don't know what it would cost in 2023. So we would provide those numbers to you before you had to take any action, obviously. But I
Perfect.
just wanted to raise that with you.
Perfect. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Historically speaking, I think the watershed has approached Corcoran with more of a punitive attitude rather than a cooperating, collaborative attitude. So part of, it seems like, at least when I was a part of it, that they wanted the metrics so they could bludgeon us with the metrics. And they also, and then they wanted a manure ordinance so they could bludgeon us with the manure ordinance, and it was frustrating. It sounds like, in the way you're speaking, that attitude has changed, or you've been able to manage it better? Is it different than it used to be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I really, really feel comfortable telling you that promoting best management practices and having people volunteer to do projects is really the sort of environment that I've encountered there. There was a time when our interaction with the watershed consisted of the watershed just basically telling people no, or coming out and citing people for violations. And that was several years ago, and I think that's really, really changed. The only thing that I've seen in terms of, for example, enforcement on violations have been pretty egregious situations. And I think maybe at some level the watershed understands that with its limited resources, it's not going to chase stuff that's small potatoes or creates adverse impacts, creates ill will. I do think there's a big commitment to the education part of this, and so, for example, at some point it would be great to have Kevin Ellis, who's at Hennepin County, who's responsible for locating and managing these mitigation and restoration projects, come in and give a presentation, and maybe the Stotts Farm one would be a good one for him to talk about, how it was a truly voluntary collaboration. And one of the points that the commissioners have made is that if Hennepin and the commission can serve as a resource, it's to help identify funding so that if people want to do a project, they don't have to bear the burden of all of the expense for doing that. And if you find property owners who have potentially sort of redeemable natural resources, and you tell them, we'd like to see you do something. We understand it's got to be fair to you. And by the way, we can help fund this for you. People respond to that. And I think they understand that.
Thank you. You're doing a great job there. I appreciate it.
Ken, we talked last time you were here. I've been trying to get something going for 5 years. Kevin has done more in the last year and a half than the previous 3.5 years. But my issue is I have repaired tile and stuff, and I've said it in the past, I'm a P-trap for the southwest corner of Corcoran. Everything divides my property. So it would be nice to get it faster. But on top of it, the landowner has to bear all the costs up front. They got to get a plan, they got to follow that plan exactly, and then once it's all done, Hennepin County comes in, or the watershed, this group comes in and inspects it, and then it's a go, but tentatively right now, they want to put 2 mitigation ponds in this tile run, and I don't want to give up that much land to do this. And then a manure structure and such. The cost of this is just crazy, and 80 to 90% being picked up by Hennepin County, the Watershed District, which is all of our taxes. I still have that issue of burdening the cost up front, which I can see it being $25,000. I'm still yet to see the plan, but Kevin didn't have those resources.
Right.
Now he has those resources, so I hope it gets steam. He's asked to come out to my property. I've given him the green light on a plan, but cost is astronomical and losing property.
Right.
As opposed to me just continually fixing drain tile.
And I think people are realistic. I mean, there's nobody there that's so naive to think that they're gonna go out and promote projects that are gonna cost a fortune for individual landowners, and landowners are gonna wanna do that. It's just not.
But I was a volunteer. It started out with 1, nothing got done for 3 years, and then Kevin has jumped in. I wanna
Yeah.
kudos to Kevin, but it's a huge project if we get a whole bunch of volunteers doing
Well,
this.
and in that regard, there was some staff changes at Hennepin about 3 years ago, and I think that's really accounted for some of the change in the public face of that.
But then how much is still funded then? I mean, I was told 80% and then another 10%, so 90%. Am I still eligible for that?
I unfortunately.
Kevin's the one to answer that?
I don't know enough detail
Okay.
on it, but I'd be happy to follow up or.
I'll do it with him. That's the frustration. A lot of talk and a huge effort on your part and Kevin's part, but I'm just not seeing a whole lot of things going
Well,
on.
so one of the big takeaways there is, and at the workshop, the council talked about doing restorations or creating natural resource amenities in the community. And it's always gonna come down to how is the cost of something that we want as a community equitably shared.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, it's a very direct burden on individual property owners, but we as a community express a desire to have something positive for the entire community. How do we share that expense equitably? And I think the Watershed Board of Water and Soil Resources, Bowser, recognizes that they have to provide financial resources to move projects along.
Okay.
Because it's not fair to ask individual property owners to bear that expense on behalf of the community. A lot of property owners will do it, but it's pretty rare. Pretty rare. And Bowser is all taxpayer money, so in effect,
Okay.
we're all paying for all of these projects, and that's the way it's gonna be. Anyway.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
So to follow up, I guess, on one of the asks, are we all comfortable with Ken following up with staff to dig into the ordinance?
I just didn't want to take up staff, time working on an ordinance without the council.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And again, before anybody gets worked up about it, obviously it's going to be a draft document, it'll be explained,
Yep.
and there'll be all of the opportunity for public review and comment.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ken.
I'm fine with it. I think we're all good.
Do we want to express an opinion about that $2,700 spend
Sure,
before and we could have an opinion about it now, couldn't we?
sure.
I certainly would be. We got a lot of value out of the first one. I was part of the first one. And I thought the way they used the data and the cooperative attitude and going to people in the community and saying, this is what we'd like to do. They were extremely cynical about whether citizens of Corcoran would want to actually participate in any of the projects. And because I went to a lot of those meetings, and it sort of pissed me off because they just kind of underestimated the will and kind of with an arrogance. And so we got a lot out of that, and a lot of people stepped up to the plate And I think with the bigger area, it makes sense to fund it. And I would suggest we do it.
I agree. It seems like a good spend. I mean, and not a significant one for how much value you're getting out of it.
I negotiated $500.
You can, you can negotiate the next one then.
Are you gonna go for $499?
I don't know. 2,700 seems really steep compared to 500, but,
Mayor? One other thing, I think this dovetails nicely with the stormwater access charge we talked about last year. For those in the audience, in many cities, there's a stormwater access fee that's charged as part of new development. So as a development goes in and they have to create stormwater systems or new drainage systems, there can be a fee collected that can be used for off-site stormwater impact projects, like what we were just talking about with Ken. So getting the intelligence on where the pollution comes from, I think is valuable. It's less valuable without the ability to do something about it. But with the stormwater access fee coming from new development in the future, I feel like we will be able to use that information better than we would have been able to 5 years ago. So I would support it too.
Sounds good. Okay. We'll move on to consent agenda, which consists of items 7, let me make sure I get this right, 7B through 7H, because A was removed. Does anyone want to pull anything?
motion to approve.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, moving right along to planning business. We have a public comment opportunity for items 8A, B, and C, which is West Side Tire, and the 2 Backfold Farm related items.
Thank you, Mayor. We have not received any public comment cards, but if anyone is in the audience that wants to talk about those, feel free to approach the podium, state your name and address. Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or click reactions and then raise your hand, and we can recognize you. Mayor, at this time, no one's raising their hand.
Perfect. And we'll go right into the item, 8A.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Kevin Shea here to present.
And maybe we'll specifically highlight the changes. I think we've all seen variations of the plan a couple times. Maybe the changes since the Planning Commission and
Sure.
more of a broad overview, and then if there's specific questions, we can dive into that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So with West Side Tire's application, I know everyone's familiar, but the site location is off of County Road 116 and 75th Avenue. So just a little background on it. The site was approved as part of the initial approval in 1992 with the site plan approval. It went over some various amendments to that to be where it currently is at today, with the initial approval not allowing outside storage, and over the years that began to occur on the site. So it's been an ongoing code violation, and the city and the property owner have been working to address that code violation. And then in March 11 of last year, the city did approve an ordinance amendment to allow outside storage and parking as a principal use subject to conditions. So this application and before you is coming under those new standards. Next slide. So the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing for this on April 7th, and their actions were to recommend approval of the site plan and interim use permit and the curb cut variance, and recommend denial of the front yard setback variance. And then staff did meet with the applicant on April 28th to discuss some options and revised plan. And so that revised plan is included in your packet, and it reduces the curb cut variance from 71 to 45 feet, where 32 feet is allowed. It removes the most of the gravel driveway from the 15-foot driveway easement on the east, expands the screen storage area on the east side of the parking lot, and it does reduce the number of parking stalls from 54 to 46. After discussion on site, to meet the minimum drive aisle width and turning radius for emergency vehicles that cause some loss in spaces to modify those drive aisles. So the original submittal is on the left-hand side and the new May 2nd submittal is on the right-hand side. They look fairly similar from a first glance perspective, but they do incorporate the comments that we just went over and mentioned. So landscape and screening. Landscaping is not shown on the plan. City historically required a fence and landscaping. So they're with the 7-foot tall chain link fence with slats. And then the ordinance requires 50 lineal feet of site perimeter, or 1 overstory per 50 lineal feet of site perimeter and 1 tree per 30 lineal feet of site perimeter. So that'd be 21 trees and 34 shrubs. So this would be required with the application, and staff recommends focusing these in the front yard and west yard area. So again, there's the larger site plan from the revised site plan received May 2nd, just showing kind of some of the revisions. The biggest one, or most noticeable one, would be the curb cut, with the width going from 71 to 45 feet, and then some of the reduction in parking spaces as well.
Can I get you to repeat something?
Sure.
Did you say that you wanted the vegetation to be on the west side
Correct.
of the building or of the parking lot across the street?
The south side, so the parking lot.
And not vegetation on the east side of that parking lot?
That was staff's recommendation, but council can certainly recommend other if they feel it.
I'm just wondering, because there's a slat on the west side of the property, there's like a landscaping company with slatted fences already.
Yeah, it was just because of the difference in spacing between the parking area and that company, and then the parking area and actual right of way. There's a lot more space on the east side, so there's just a natural area between it, with them already screening it.
And I think part of it was also the easement, not planning trees in that driveway easement, was, I believe, part of the discussion as well.
Okay.
And there's really no other room outside of that?
Yeah, there's
On
not
that side.
a whole lot of room outside that. One of the discussions we had with the applicant was if we needed to put trees towards the south end of the parcel, we had talked about that.
The problem with planting trees on the west side is you're planting them in a snowmobile trail.
I get it, but what are the trees even for?
Right.
Screening of what? And I don't get it.
I think that's where I would look for the city to give leniency like we did with St. Therese.
Okay, carry on.
So for you tonight would be the recommendation for adoption of the site plan and interim use permit, and approving the curb cut variance and approving the setback variance. However, there are alternate resolutions included in the packet. If council does find that the variance standards have not been met, the alternative resolutions to the curb cut variance and the setback variance would be the denial resolutions included in the packet. If there are any questions for staff, otherwise the applicant is present as well.
Thank you. Did we want to follow up on, so Alan, you had mentioned the tree issue.
Yeah, I mean, to me, 21 trees and 31 shrubs on this site that's bordered by a neighbor that has a fenced property where there's a snowmobile trail slotted. The south side, the proposal is you leave the south side open, they would come up the west side with the snowmobile trail, and then further, the south side is bordered by a tree line. And the east side's bordered by a utility easement, or access easement. So where would he put the trees and the shrubs? To me, it's kind of ridiculous to have this requirement. I mean, I can see some shrubbery along the north side of the parking lot, between that and the street, but you don't need 31 shrubs in there and 21 trees.
Well, fortuitously, at the work session just prior to this council meeting, we discussed that there actually is a feature in code that would allow us to accept trees planted in public space instead, if we wanted to do that. Or there's a cash in lieu version of that could be enacted as well. So we wouldn't even have to send it back for another variance. That could just be something that we put in as a condition.
We couldn't put trees on the east side because of easement?
There's an access easement to the property to the south.
No, I'm talking about the east.
Yeah. And the east
Oh,
side.
oh, they go through the east side to get to the south side.
If you can put that map back
Yeah,
up, so
good.
the yellow is the
China.
driveway easement,
I can't, mine doesn't work.
the driveway design.
The green one seems to work the best.
Green one works really good.
Well, we already, yeah. There we go, right there.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a access easement, correct, to the property to the south?
What goes here? Wood
That's
chips?
Storage.
No, that's storage.
Storage?
That's fenced-in storage.
And that fenced-in storage provides the screening for the parking lot facing east.
But
Right,
what gets stored there?
The storage that we've been on them to move out the stuff into a screened-in storage.
Yeah, I know, but then what about this property here? They gotta look at the stuff they already look at.
No, they're
Well,
looking at
it's-
two sides of the fence.
Yeah.
There's a fence on both sides.
Oh, okay.
To me, the only logical place to put any, can I hear your pointer? All right.
Uh-oh.
The only logical place for me to put any shrubbery is in here. If you're gonna
Right.
require anything, that's where you would put it.
Before we go too far, could I ask the applicant a question?
Sure.
Sean, the 45-foot driveway, will that work? I know
It's not ideal, but we're gonna have to make it work, because we understand why you're.
Okay.
requirement.
I still know, again, we're trying to corral something here that's been open and doing very good for our city for a very long time, and we're really clamping down, and I know that driveway opening needs to be as big as it can, and if 45 feet is it, so be it. But I agree with the landscaping, I wouldn't put anything to the west, because all it is a landscape company. Whether or not snowmobile access stays there and such, that's a whole nother thing, and then the area to the south is a menagerie of trees and a berm and all of that, along with a lot of runoff, a lot of wetland along that side, so I'm not too crazy about all the landscape either.
Gotcha.
And I'm not sure I'd want cash in lieu of or anything. I don't know what that does with all of the money they've spent so far. We still don't have much of a structure there. The cost of redrawing is astronomical for this, and all of it is a parking lot.
Yeah, and while we do have that authority that you mentioned, Jeremy, I almost think we should probably develop more of a policy before we implement it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I do like that idea going forward on some stuff
Yeah.
once we have that. But for here, I'd say we probably follow more of a template of St. Therese, what we did there.
My only concern there is, with St. Therese, we requested that they go back and submit a variance, which has its own set of costs.
True.
So that's the counter argument.
Well, can we just
change
amend the requirement?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, or Councilmember Schultz, because it is a requirement that's in code, in order to vary from it, you do need a variance. It's not something that the council or staff can waive without a variance.
So would it be best to require what is feasible on site in that north area? And if any other, if there's some space in the south that makes sense or something, and then to do the off-site thing as opposed to trying to think of what the cost would be to go through the whole variance process for a change, or to just plant the trees off-site.
My guess is the cost of variance is less than the cost of planting trees off-site, and we didn't really, here's my problem with that. One is we didn't go for it with St. Therese.
Yeah.
And two, I only heard about this thing tonight at a work session. So
Yeah.
I'd like to get is there a way to approve this and table the landscaping requirement for a future meeting so you can move forward with putting down a bituminous and making it I don't want to keep punting this thing down the road.
Right. Or Councilmember Schultz, I don't know of a way to defer or delay something that's required at this stage in the application, as they wouldn't be coming back for future applications. The city's review authority is now versus later.
With St. Therese, didn't we approve some stuff and then require that they submit a variance or plant as code states?
We did, we put that in the, I believe we put that in the resolution that they either planted as it states or if they put in for the variance. So we could put in some sort of
We could
language.
essentially say that they have to meet code or come back with a variance. That is an option, but there's not a way to defer looking at the landscaping. It would have to be something that's addressed now with this resolution.
What's the cost of a variance request? It's on that fee schedule. I should know it tonight, but I don't memorize every fee that was listed on there.
Memorize the whole
Give me 1
packet?
second.
Come on,
I
Alan.
can tell you.
Oh.
That was one of your campaign promises. You'd memorize every packet.
Verbatim.
It is, for a variance, it is $550 and a $2,000 escrow.
2,500 bucks versus, and you can get portion of that escrow back depending upon how much time the
Right.
city uses. So you can, I guess we could approve it as is, and you can figure out how you want to proceed forward with landscaping.
Mr. Paul brought up a good.
Sean, if you want to, could you come up to the mic so we have it on record? Thank you.
And if you, Mr. Lure, if there's anything you want to say.
Yeah,
As
feel
far as
free.
presentation, feel free, yeah.
Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for the consideration. I appreciate your thought on the landscaping. Mr. Paul, my representative from, the engineer from VAA, thought, could we possibly plant trees on west side proper to help offset the number of trees? I mean, we'll put trees on the property, but can we plant them on existing property?
I'd be fine with that. Is
Yeah,
that
I would.
possible?
I'd be good.
Yeah.
So then it eliminates the variance process. It makes, let's just proceed forward tonight. Is that acceptable?
If we can do it, I think we're all open to it.
I think we'd be okay with it, but
Yeah.
can
Doesn't
you
need to be a
take the
variance.
requirements from one property and put them on an adjacent property if they're
Would it
not
kind
up?
of be using that policy that,
The transfer?
The policy
yeah, just in a way
only-
where,
That's for public
It's
property.
for public
oh,
land.
okay.
So that would be the only,
How about if it's owned by the same?
it doesn't, I'm trying to find the exact subdivision here.
Well, could we approve it with either that or a variance that has to be filed if that's not feasible?
I think we.
The language could be amended in the resolution to either require them to be planted on the south side lot, the north side lot, or request a variance from the landscape standards.
Gotcha. How does that sound?
You could write it so they could put it on either lot?
That's kind
Is
of.
that
where I
part of the
took
variance?
Direction from the council is which
I think,
way they'd want to word that part, but I would leave it as one or the other, either the south side of the lot or a variance, and then as a separate, the north side or a variance, because it's either complying with code or requiring a variance. So if staff goes back and there's no way to require or allow the landscaping on a site that isn't the site under the application, then we need to require a variance. So that'd be kind of the way we'd have to word the resolution. Either they comply with code or they are required to get a variance.
Isn't the north side site tied into the application though in some way? Because the whole part of
It was
the,
related to the parking and stuff, we're all
yeah,
trying
and
to get.
storage, it's all related.
I believe so, I just can't confirm that.
I'd want to double
Double
check.
check.
Just because we don't have properties often that are.
This is our only one.
Yeah,
This is our only one that's
Right.
split by a public road.
right.
And that was my point that I was just gonna make. You just beat me to the punch. So the parking is tied.
Right.
We've got parking stalls on both the north and south side. So they're tied together.
Yeah.
That's all I was gonna say.
I think we're all on the same page. We're trying to figure out if it's legal.
Right.
Constitution.
Well, do we move forward with the proposed, and if it's deemed to be not legal by the city attorney, we just come back and readdress it, and that cost would fall to us and not the applicant, wouldn't it? Because that's an error on the city.
Correct. We would bring back a resolution that would need to be amended per city attorney guidance.
And then we'd probably just have to go the variance route
Yeah,
if that
and
didn't
then
work.
likely it would be the variance route at that point.
It would just go through on consent agenda to fix the
Right.
clerical issue or something.
If it's a clerical issue, yes, if it's not, if we're not able to do it via code, we'd have to do the variance.
Okay.
Gotcha.
I believe.
Are we all comfortable with that aspect, I think?
Yeah, so can it be written that they can use the north or south property or combination thereof? If he chooses to put 4 of these 34 bushes on the north side of the parking space on the south parcel and puts everything else on the north parcel, what does the city care?
Exactly. It would be just to have the required number of trees somewhere on the north and south parcel compliant with city code.
All right.
Or require variance if that's the city attorney's guidance is that they need to still apply for that.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think with the direction that we'd like to see some of the screening along the north side there with the shrubs or whatever. But other than that, I think the rest being on the north or wherever fits in works for me. Makes sense.
Yeah, and I would only say if you're gonna put any shrubs down there, you only put them on, of course, this doesn't work. Only put them on this side.
Right.
Because if you're plowing snow, more likely you're gonna plow to the west, aren't you?
That is correct.
So don't put any on the west side. That would be my suggestion. The west side of the parking space.
If we could not put any over there, that would be perfect.
Yeah, that,
Works for me.
leave it up to you, as to wherever you want to put them.
Yeah.
I
So
would
wh-
like to make a comment, though.
Yeah.
If there is an expense to the city, I do not want the city to pay for that. That would be my responsibility for coming back if there's some kind of an expense. I don't think that's right. So if you have to deal with this later, I think it should be my expense.
Well, I'm saying if it's an expense because city staff doesn't know if it's legal what the council wants to recommend. That's our error.
That's on
And it
a,
would just be the staff time that
Yeah.
we're putting in to bring it back to council.
I would still go on record saying that I think that's my responsibility to pay for that.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that,
Thank
yeah.
understood.
What do we need as far as action
That's,
goes?
yep, so to make that modification,
So to make that modification, we'd change the resolution related, or the item related to landscaping.
Number 11, on page 3 of 4, of resolution
Bless you.
2022-50.
Check it out.
Yeah, nice.
11,
Hopefully there's no hail.
it's starting.
If anybody's got a window open in your car, now might be a good
Yeah.
time to go close it.
I think it's rolling in.
There's what?
It's,
Oh, he left.
he's gone.
I think he got wise to the,
Oh, was that Mark's?
yeah.
I don't think that Mustang, I don't
That's-
think that
He just got it
Mustang has
too,
ever
then.
seen
It's his, yeah,
rainwater.
it's his new baby.
So,
Yes, so number 11 of 2020-50 is the part that we would change.
Okay.
Put in language related to the applicant. The 21 trees.
Thank you, Sean.
34 shrubs shall be planted on site in either the north or south.
Or
lot.
combination
Yep.
of.
Or a combination of, or a variance, or a
Or if not
apply-
feasible, a
if not
variance.
Feasible, apply for a variance.
I'll make a motion to amend section 11 as stated by Jessica there for that.
I would second
Any
everybody.
further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Mr. Mayor, one
I have trouble telling.
clarification.
Yeah.
That was a motion to amend
Just to amend it.
And adopt it as approval.
That will be next. That was just to
Okay,
amend it,
okay.
yeah. So that takes care of the landscaping issue. We talked about the curb cut. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No.
Any questions?
I think the only,
Setback.
yeah, the setback
curb
question
cut.
would be next.
Go for it.
So, Planning Commission, I believe, recommended denial of the request for the variance on the setback. I was wanting to ask the applicant, are you comfortable with that? I mean, it's been debated hotly. I know there's lots of people who like to use the mobile trail the way that it is. I could be persuaded either way, but I know there was a lot of discussion on that topic previously.
I will let my engineer explain the reason why we're having issues with that.
Good evening. My name is Landon Pohl with BAA Engineering. I've been working with Sean on this since early 2020. It's been a long time. And I know Sean's been dealing with it longer. So the setback issue is a complicated one. It's there's several reasons why the site is laid out how it is. We need parking, we need outside storage. You only have so much space to work with. You only have so much usable space to work with. When we walked on site on the 28th, I believe that was, you walk back there, especially in the southwest corner, you very quickly realize that is the low point of the property. All the drainage goes there. So think of your yard, putting up a shed, putting any kind of storage out there. He's running back there with a skid loader, forklift, what have you. He's just going to sink down into the mud, okay? So in order to build that up, in order to prevent that, you need quite a bit of fill, about 2.5 to 3 feet-ish of fill to bring it up to grade so it's nice, high and dry, right? So when we do that, now you're expanding your disturbance limits, okay? So when you expand your disturbance limits, if you're under an acre, it's really not a big deal. But as soon as you go over 1 acre, you bring in the watershed, you bring in the MPCA for construction permitting, you bring in different stormwater requirements. So we worked as hard as we could to keep this under 1 acre, okay? So if we shifted everything south another 15 feet, you really have 2 options. One is you decrease that outside storage, which does not benefit west side. Or you keep that same outside storage, you likely relocate the snowmobile trail somewhere, and you're likely you're increasing your disturbance limits, therefore creating the need for the different permits through the watershed and the state. So there's the disturbance limits, snowmobile trail, wetlands in the tree line, trying to preserve the trees. I mean, we just talked about landscaping. I mean, I'm not for one to cut trees down just to plant trees back. That just doesn't frankly make sense to me. So there's several reasons why. Hope I explained.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you, Landon.
Any other?
Any other questions on that?
No, I'd be willing to go with the variance as requested.
Yeah. The 35 feet,
Yeah, the 35 feet.
I would as well.
Same here.
Anything else?
Okay.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion. This will be a big one, to approve resolution 2022-50 as amended, approving the site plan and interim use permit. Resolution 2022-51 approving the curb cut variance, and resolution 2022-52 approving the setback variance.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Can we make it so it's a one-time deal? And then we've got do you know what I'm trying to say? I don't want all of a sudden everybody coming and saying you did it for them, but not for us.
Well, variances
Is there a way
don't
to?
set precedents.
They're all unique.
It's not, yeah, yep, no, I think,
We should be okay with what, we've got it written and all of those things?
I think so, and I think
That's
it's
all I
a pretty
wanted to-
unique circumstance.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
No problem. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Variances always set precedents for people asking for
I know,
variances.
I just, it's been so long.
The
Yep.
existence of state law on variances creates the
Yeah.
ask for variances.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much for your patience.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah. Last time you were here, everybody left after you were done.
Alrighty, let's see here. I'm missing 8.
That didn't have a very positive outcome last time.
No.
I'm happy with
Oh, no,
the
I'm
end of
good at it.
this
I'm good.
3-year ordeal for all of us.
I'm sure applicant has too.
All right. We'll go on to 8B, which is Bechtold Farm, final plat and development agreement?
Yes.
Correct.
Is there any, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are we gonna go over all of it, or just the changes from since?
I was thinking we'd go real quick on unless people had questions, because I don't think there's really any changes.
Okay.
The power presentation is like 4 slides.
If there was no changes, why wasn't this on consent agenda like the others were a couple weeks ago?
Just due to the fact that it has the public hearing for the easement vacation tied to the plat.
Oh, but the easement vacations in the second item.
I guess to make
Staff
it
just felt
go
that because
together.
the 2 requests
Oh.
are tied together. that-
So can I make a motion that
Sure.
we approve the final plat for Bechtold Farms at Rush Creek?
Yeah.
Second.
Have a second?
I do have a comment.
Okay.
So Phil Corcoran, partner, as far as the development goes. We have been in communication with city staff in regards to the language for the driveway access location for Lot 1, Block 1. So it does state that it shall come off of Chaparral Lane, which we will be building. We would like to modify that language. We do feel that it's worth the discussion, or further discussion, to determine the best location to access Lot 1, Block 1. So we'd like to see the language, added language to give us more time for the city staff and my partner and I to determine that.
Okay.
Do you want us to pull it up on the?
Yeah, let's do that.
Talk about that? So it would be this parcel here, I believe.
The existing farm?
The existing farm, to be correct.
Okay.
So right now, the existing driveway comes off of Bechtold Road, somewhere in here. The language states that shall come off Chaparral. This grade drops down quickly as you enter the property, which means that the driveway needs to be pushed tight to Bechtold Road and then run parallel to Bechtold Road. Your best build site is gonna be somewhere, I'm gonna say just to the north of the existing barn. That's why we feel like it's worth further discussion to determine if that is in fact the best location, or if we, do in fact stay off of Bechtold Road.
Yeah, and furthermore, we feel that part of the reason for it wanting to remove it was fine when the buildings were gonna stay to keep the driveway there. But when they learned that the buildings were gonna come down, in fact, there'd be a new property, so all 12 of them looked uniform all the way through the community, then it triggered the need to go and put the verbiage that have it come off Chaparral. My understanding is the need is to try to minimize how many access points you have coming off Bechtold, right? But if the very purpose of that need is a safety concern, that's now creating actually a greater concern by a 300 to 400 foot run of parallel driveway that's going to be running headlights down. Imagine at night you're driving north of Bechtold Road and someone's coming out of their driveway while someone's also going south down Bechtold Road. I mean, it would cause panic of having 2 sets of headlights coming at you like this and you're in the middle of it.
How many feet up the driveway is that?
It's to the build site's almost 400 feet off of Chaparral to where the build site would be.
No, but Bechtold Road to the driveway as it,
Right now.
This
To be determined.
this parallelness,
Um,
I measured it to the build site from where Chaparral would be, where it would have to squeeze against the road. It would bend there to about 436 feet is what I did on the GIS.
But running from Bechtold parallel where the driveway access would be, I mean, you'd be within 75 feet.
How far is it to the road from here?
To the parking lot from
Yeah.
here? You're over 75, for sure.
I'm just wondering if it's a real, I'm just
But
wondering if
there's
it's a
also
real
other
concern or
concerns
not.
As far as water drainage and just the, proximity to the intersection of Chaparral, which we're going to be building, and then in Bechtold Road. And that's why we feel it's, that's why we're asking for the language to be, or added language to give staff and us more time to review and determine the best location for that.
Kevin, if you have it, do you have anything to add on it or a little color on it?
I think, excuse me, I think I would be comfortable modifying the condition that relates to this to basically consider, I would like to see the site plan and some of the information. I haven't actually been able, I've talked to them, we haven't been able to go to the site and truth out this information, not that we don't. I would like to see their new site plan and then evaluate which access point is safer or better for the long-term use. So I think if we modify, I think it's condition 10 with some language that basically allows staff discretion to put it, potentially allow it to access off of Bechtold. I would be open to that if it was supported by council.
Okay, thank you. Let me find condition 10 here. Find a resolution. How does that sound, everyone, to give the flexibility based on staff's review?
It's fine with me.
You said it was condition 10?
Condition 10, yep.
2250.
Thank you.
Yep.
Easier than finding myself. Okay.
Not exactly sure how we'd amend it, but we.
There's I drafted up something with
Kevin drafted.
with
Oh.
Kendra that you might be able to read that I'm
Perfect.
comfortable with.
One sec.
I have it pulled up too, Jessica,
Oh,
if you want.
do you want to go ahead and read that?
So the recommended language would be at the end of the condition to include, unless as part of the building permit application, the city determines the relocation is infeasible. The relocation to Chaparral is infeasible.
Work for everyone?
I think we need to withdraw the motion
Yes.
that's on the floor.
Yep. John, is that good with you?
Friendly amendment to withdraw the emotion, or the motion? Yes.
Thank you for reminding me. So then if we wanted to make a motion to amend resolution 2022-53 as stated, and then potentially approve it, someone wants to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to amend it as staff read.
Second.
Just for the amendment?
Yeah, for the amendment.
Second?
Yes.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, on the other side of the road, there's another driveway that, I'm trying to think of, is it gonna be out of place? There's a driveway on the other side of Bechtold,
Correct.
right,
So the
kinda
existing
where,
driveway
yeah.
that accesses Bechtold, there's driveways on either side of that.
Yeah.
on the east side of Bechtold.
That's what I was gonna say, yeah. It won't be, I hate all of a sudden thinking of, having a new thing come up that we haven't thought through.
Yep.
Try not to do that to us. Because then we get a little skeptical of, we gotta think about a lot of different things. But
Yeah, you hope everything's bulletproof in all cases, and then you get a unique.
someone throws a curveball at us, and then we think about it when we get home, and we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about whatever. So technically, these kind of things should be in the packet, so we can, read it, absorb it.
I did have conversation with Kendra, getting her the approval for, saying
Right,
that we're
it's
okay with the access off of Chaparral.
Dead-
But after we were on site
dead
again,
between the two.
we had some concerns after we looked at the location. and then
Fair enough,
that's why I'm
yeah,
bringing it up.
I understand. I'm just wanting you to, I'm not against it, I'm just trying to think about things thoroughly.
Well, it's a good point you raised it, because the removal of the driveway doesn't remove any safety issue because of the driveway on the other side of the road anyway. You know what I mean? If the recommendation is to remove the driveway that's existing on Bechtold because of a safety issue and reroute it on Chaparral, you don't eliminate a safety issue because you got a driveway on the other side of the road,
Yeah,
so.
Okay, we had a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. So then that was just to make the amendment, however.
Yeah, I'll approve the final draft resolution.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve.
Second.
Perfect. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, then on, thank you. On to 8C, which again, I don't know if we need too much.
We just have to open the public.
Oh, yes, of course. Go ahead and open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone wanting to speak at the public hearing can go to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 if you're joining us via phone. Otherwise, click reaction and raise your hand. No one is raising their hand.
Okay. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, then we'll just go into the item, which is pretty straightforward. Anyone have any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the vacation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Moving right along. No unfinished business today, so we will go on to new business. We have a public
Thank you.
comment. Thanks, guys. Have a public comment opportunity for items 10A through 10E with the addition.
Yes, thank you. Mayor and Council, anyone wishing to speak public comment for these items for new business can press *9 or click raise your reactions and raise your hand if you're joining us virtually. Or if anyone's in the audience, can come up to the podium and address council. Otherwise, we do have a few folks in the audience who are here for a particular item, so we can have them speak at that time.
Yeah, if you guys want to speak when we'll have some back and forth, I'm sure some questions for you, so perfect.
Perfect. So with that being said, Mayor and Council, we do have item number 10A today, is discussion on Ebert Road right-of-way. Staff has met with at least one staff with one resident along Ebert Road to discuss a potential subdivision, some potential building plans and potential subdivision. And one of the items that has come up is a discussion related to road right-of-way. Currently, there is right-of-way along this property here, shown in the orange area. There has been some discussion on whether or not the city be open to exchanging some of that right-of-way or selling some of that right-of-way. So really tonight, we're here to discuss whether or not we'd be interested in that, or if we'd be looking to do something different. From a staff perspective, when we have folks come in for subdivision, that's our opportunity to make changes to right-of-way. That would be one of our bites at the apple, to make changes to right-of-way along public streets. And so that's really one of the discussions here today. If that comes in, what would we be open to doing? Currently, like I said, we have this little orange section here. A couple options for the city to look at would be reducing the size of the right-of-way here and spreading it out along one of the other parcels, or looking at doing some sort of turnaround. One of the challenges we have along this road is we don't currently actually have a turnaround on city right-of-way. So currently we have been through the kindness of the landowner to the north, have been able to turn around city trucks at the north property. So this is really a discussion.
What an amazing person that
Yeah.
That
that
sounds
person
like
is
an
to be.
He's a
amazing
good guy.
person, really. So
Dedicate that permit.
so
I
that
don't think he's that amazing.
that's really the discussion today. So some of the things that staff thinks about is just any time that we have a chance to amend and get more right-of-way for future improvements, we always look to do that. And so that's really the discussion here today, is to understand what council thoughts are on that. So those are a couple of the different options we have thought about.
Gotcha, and just to clarify, left is the existing.
The left is
Yep.
existing, yes, so this current is existing. I think when we went back and looked at plan sets from the past, it looked like there was an S-curve planned to kind of move the road, if it was ever to be finished kind of out away from those houses, is why that additional right-of-way seems bigger on the bottom than.
Ebert Road would veer
Yeah.
slightly to the west and come down.
Yes, yeah, that's how.
For why?
For setbacks along with the houses, because I really wish that I had a
Laser pointer?
laser pointer, because I
Do
could.
we have any of the good ones?
Finger
We have one good one
I'm gonna
between.
buy a whole bunch of green
Green
ones the
one.
second I get home tonight.
So I think there's the house is right there and right there. So they're set, they're not very far set back from the road, so when the right-of-way was taken in the first place, they were thinking that that would help move the road back. But no development has taken place since, so we have not gotten any additional right-of-way.
Gotcha. Any questions off of that, or did you guys wanna?
I was gonna say that Gideon did mention that he does have plans of what they're looking to do, if you would like to see them.
Absolutely.
As part of the discussion.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Gideon Slabaugh. My wife Heather is here. Pat and Kathy Gillespie, they live right next to me at the house.
Can you point out which properties you live at on the map?
Yeah. I'm in this section right here.
Okay.
Okay. So how we got here is back in December, we had a house fire. When the winter storms came through, a big pine tree went down, snapped off a power pole. The two of them pulled the line off the corner of my house at 3 o'clock in the morning and started the house on fire. So currently, we are not living here. The house is not livable, it has to be. We were looking at redoing the house is small, so it's like, well, if you're ever gonna make changes, now's the time to make changes. The insurance company is requiring fire restoration. The addition we were looking at putting to it, the cost, we can't even go there. I mean, it's something that can't be done, with the square footage and everything. And so we're kind of back to square one, where it's like, well, we're probably better off just building a brand new house. Take the old house down. The old house was built in the 1940s, from what my understanding is. So I have this lad right here. Pat, which is right here with me, he has the L shape here. Pat is willing to sell me this part right here that goes down behind here. Back in the 90s, when this was subdivided, they could have went straight across or do the L. They had gone with the L option. Now Pat is willing to sell me this piece that is behind me here, which would widen my lot out, and then I would be able to push my new house farther back. But by me trying to get this piece here is creating an issue with the easement. That's what we're running into.
How does it relate to the easement? Can you explain it?
Because Pat's house is right here, and they want a 33-foot easement
Oh, because it's a replotting of his property.
Exactly.
Yes.
No,
So
good
we're
grief.
caught in a,
Yeah.
you know. My understanding is this side here, this is not 33 feet, this is like 49 and a half feet in. They went, there's more easement here than technically, from what I'm understanding, is.
Yeah, I think.
Standard.
It would have
It's-
been.
My understanding is, from talking with Pat here, the reason this was done, instead of taking easement on this side, everything was taken on this side of the road, was the idea, this was back in the 90s, was the idea, when you come up in the 90s, they would flip on the other side of the road and take 49 feet on that side without taking anything off of this side. My understanding is that's why they had gone so far in on my south end. So that's what would have made the S-curve in the road. This- But that was back in the 90s, so, I don't know.
So the question for the city is, do you care about that width of easement? Because they can't withdraw their property unless we give up that easement, right? Is that the?
Or don't take that easement.
Like right now, where my house, the house that had the fire, if you were to come in 33 feet, you would be taking off over half the deck off the house. That's where the easement goes. And then Pat's house, which is right next to me, he's right up on the other side. You know, his is in just a little bit further, but again, it would come right up, you know, you'd be coming up against our houses, you know, current houses.
Yeah. I am Pat Gillespie, and I'm about here. It is a configuration like L-shaped because it was, I went to the first city council meeting, in fact, up at the old place on Kane Road that did this whole thing in the first place. And the theory was that when we bought it this way, there was a hope we'd buy this property as well eventually and consolidate the two, and it never worked out for us. So now we have the situation where we have a big L shape here, which we don't get much use out of here, and it would make a lot more sense from a development perspective to have two square lots rather than a crazy configuration like this. Unfortunately, sometimes, you know, helping out your neighbor creates all these problems, so I'm going to lose half my front yard if I help my neighbor by selling him this part of the property. I can appreciate the city wants a place to turn around for their vehicles, but I don't know if that's really related here. And I appreciate that sometimes, you know, you want to do other things, like here, that when we did this, they put this on here, because the theory was going to be a big S like this to avoid
Just
houses.
one thing I want to point out is there's a building right up here in the corner too. You have a.
That's my stable.
That's your
Yeah.
stable up there too, so. And that's literally right in the corner, so.
The square was just to provide a pictorial of, that we don't currently have a turnaround on, and that would be one of the things. Generally, in speaking with Kevin, we, from a public works and engineering standpoint, we generally like to not lose right-of-way and not put us in a net negative position. Maybe Kevin can talk more about that.
Yeah, so there's kind of one thing snowballs to the next on this, so it's a little convoluted. We're open to releasing that orange area that's highlighted, but generally we would want to make sure we're not in a net, we're at least in an equivalent position when we do that. That's really what we've stated to the property owner as he's been trying to develop ideas. So we're working with ideas that happened 30 years ago, and we're trying to just position ourselves for how we can not be in a, that's a challenging corridor for us to maintain. So we don't love the idea of making it harder for us to do that. And again, this is our opportunity to at least either improve it, reposition it, whatever word you want to use. So as a recommendation to you, that's the starting recommendation. So that's what we shared with staff, or with the resident, is we're open to ideas of exchanging that for more right-of-way along this edge. We're open that for an idea of getting a road easement, maybe on the property across the road where we think the road, due to the existing setbacks, where the road might be built. We've kind of suggested some things for him to pursue. Unfortunately, all of them are really kind of outside of his control, right? He's going to another entity that's a challenge. I mean, he's in a challenging situation. So again, what we've shared with him is, you know, we'd like to try to at least not go backwards in terms of the right-of-way challenges. We're open to any creative ideas you can come up with any of the neighbors. And I think he's saying, or I don't want to put words in the mouth, I think his ask potentially is just allow us to release it because we don't need it. And at this point, we don't know what we're going to do with that road, so I can't say we don't need that. But that's really up for you guys, and I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I don't want to interrupt you, but, I mean, there is nothing proposed up here at the end of the road. And let's be, I mean, there's only two houses on Ebert Road, us and him. And then there's a private road goes over here off of it, but that's a private road, that's not city property.
Yeah, but that's their only access, so they rely on Ebert Road.
Yeah, they do, so we can't close it off, you're right. But there's only three houses back here. And so we're not talking about a lot of traffic on Heber Road here.
Well, at one time, this was supposed to be a development.
At one time, there was some hope of that, but unfortunately, he got no support from anybody who lived on Heber Road, and he abandoned that idea.
Well, he was gonna come off the next road over. That was an OS&P not too long ago that came.
Well, if he would have done that, I guess we couldn't have much about it. That wouldn't bother Heber Road then.
No, I know, I mean, your thing is really affected by this property over here, right?
Well,
Because that's where we could get our easement if we could.
yeah, and at some point, he's gonna want to probably try to develop that, and then you can get your easement if you need to.
Yeah. So the yellow line right here, that's what,
Yeah,
the easement?
Just a proposal, or just to visually show you that if we were options for reducing that large.
Is that our standard easement size?
It's not
Not proportional.
It's
Not to
more
scale.
pictorial, it's not to scale.
Okay.
No.
It's really just meant to be, this is all conceptual, right? It could be replaced with, if we had a tenth of an acre of right-of-way, could we get a tenth, widen that out to equivalent a tenth of an acre and basically swap it, reposition it, realign it so it was more advantageous, potentially, and then we're in a not net worse situation. So that, it was just, those are just intended to be creative ideas that we floated. I don't know if it's supported by anyone, and again, it relies on a lot of other properties besides him, so.
Yeah.
These are just conceptual ideas, nothing, there's no formal application here, it's just kind of a problem solving.
But I think that if, may I speak?
Yeah.
So the Ebert Road becoming a more, or a better road, or staying the same impacts two properties. The one on the east side and then the one on the north side. Because an Ebert Road that's underdeveloped impacts the ability to put a certain kind of development on the property to the north. But if they were gonna develop over on the east side, they would probably want Ebert Road to be improved. So I think that if in the future that gets developed, Ebert Road would be improved on the east side. So that really the only property that it would impact would be the property to the north. And I guess that's my property. And buying it, I knew that Ebert wasn't up to snuff for a development, and I'm not gonna develop it, and no plans to develop it. And I really think that this is my opinion, since my property is the property impacted by this particular easement, and really nobody else's property is, I don't feel like I have the right to force them to make Ebert an improved road for future development. That's a problem that I bought and knew about. And so I really don't think that we need to worry about that. I don't know if net positive is an issue. We gave up an easement not that long ago for where Kane Road in theory would extend. Remember that? We didn't get anything in exchange for that.
No, but we knew we wouldn't use it because we're never gonna put a road across
Yeah.
that one, but, I mean, that's just sharing the thought process.
Yeah.
that we've portrayed, and that's, I think your guys' discretion on that valuation, so that's what we shared with the landowner too.
So if this easement for improvement on Ebert Road goes away, I'm impacted negatively with my property value, because I will have limited development. It will limit my ability to develop that if I ever do. But the thing I'm saying is, I bought it knowing that was the case. I don't feel like it's their responsibility to make sure that for me or any future owners, that they make sure that that road is improved and available for development.
There's 3 other properties off that road, though, at the end of it, isn't there?
Yeah, but they're 3-acre properties.
Yeah.
And they're on a private road of their own, so they just go on to Hebert, but they're not gonna be
Yeah.
impacted by any develop, they can't develop back there.
No, but I'm
They
just,
have.
I'm wondering what's the impact of having no easement along the side of the road? From a city staff standpoint and from a private land, from these other, and you got your opinion on it, but,
I mean, no easement at all, or?
well, I mean, they're
You
gonna,
don't need an improved road for these,
Right.
these three houses here. You only see two of them, so I should third one.
yeah.
They don't need an improved road. I mean, they're fine with the road they have right now.
Well, yeah, and their driveway is it's significantly worse than Eagle
Well,
Road.
this road,
Well,
yeah.
Their private road is about half the size of what Eber Road is.
Yeah, but that's neither here nor there, right? That's their personal issue. I'm just wondering about from a city standpoint, from maintenance and whatnot. I think I've been on that road with Pat when we snowplow, but I can't remember it. Isn't the trees just right next to the road?
Yeah,
Everything's really tight.
Yeah.
It's space limitations, and keep in mind the improvements we're just really talking about right of way. I don't think
Yeah.
improvements will be associated with, so we're not talking about paving the road. We're really talking about the right of way and the city right of way here, what we would exchange, I believe.
Yeah,
think
I
that's-
don't think.
It's
we-
not triggering
we
a
hadn't-
physical, like, improvement to the road.
No, but I'm
What it
talking
does
about, is there
it makes our-
ditching on that side of the road, or what if you
Yeah,
had to
I mean, I
remove
don't-
trees on
I
it?
have, I mean, it's space limited, right? So when you have a plow equipment, you're trying to turn it around, when you're trying to, the ability to maintain trees, the ability to deal with drainage, the ability to, permit small utilities, to those properties up to the north, they all come into play. It's right-of-way management, right? So it's a challenge for us today. And then the conversation is, are we making it more of a challenge than we want to or not? So that when I kind of say net neutral, we're open to swapping out. That's just kind of practice policy, right? We can modify that, orientate that differently, and I would be okay recommending it. Just to flat out release it when we don't know how we're gonna resolve some of those challenges, that's kind of that's the conversation piece, is do we wanna release something that where we don't know if it's gonna be if it's gonna be part of a future solution, we might wanna retain it until we know we have at least an equivalent solution that we can accept in
So-
exchange. Does that make sense? That's kind of the debate we're having.
So just looking at the west side of Ebert Road, if you were to exchange the right-of-way that's there on the southern side and sort of spread that out to the north, how far out from the road could you go before you create a problem for setbacks or the other things for the structures that are in place?
From memory, I believe you really couldn't bring those structures into compliance. So I mean, I think they're a non-compliant structure in any scenario, if that makes sense, from memory, from conversations.
So they're legal non-conforming now,
Yeah.
and they would remain legal non-conforming if we made an increase,
And that's the whole reason why I'm trying to get this here, so our new structure would be
not, yeah.
would be pushed back,
Mhm.
which I would be coming back against or upon, but this is now the property line now, which again, I can't do that if I don't have to, but it would have to be, I'm not sure how many feet, I'd have to be way.
Gravity.
So his property, the property to the north, would be non-conforming now also?
I believe so. Again,
Okay.
I'm not a planner, and I'm probably way out of my.
That's all right.
Could help with the
No, I
conversation.
think our property is not conforming right now. But it's been there forever.
Yep.
It's not set back from the road to be legal.
Right.
It's been that way we bought it forever.
But if the potential applicant's home is set farther back from Ebert Road, I guess I don't quite follow why the existing right-of-way would be a problem leaving it where it is, because the new property would be set farther back, right? So where's the source of friction there?
Well, the source of friction is their property is impacted by the sale of the land to make him be able to build a house.
Yeah, we would lose part of our front yard
Yes, helping our
in order
neighbors.
to sell, in order to him give Gideon the land he needs to build a house further back.
If it were extended, not if it were just to
Yeah.
remain what's existing currently.
Which is right above our rate
Yep.
where our mailbox is. So right before our driveway, I don't know if we can see it, that's our easement. But
believe-
if we were to purchase the land, we're saying it would go all.
My driveway, and then I have a mailbox, and it's just to the south is where where the easement starts cutting in, But again, this is a whole 49.5 feet in instead of a 33, One thing I would ask is that it would be pulled back to 33 feet, because that really cuts in pretty hard.
Aren't there two separate issues?
Yeah.
One is whether we demand that 33 feet go all the way back to the corner of the property. So that's one issue. And two, do we...
Size of that.
Yeah, couldn't we just not have the easement go all the way back and keep, I mean, if we demanded to, you're just trying to fix something in advance, but I guess in theory, we could say, well, we'll keep the whatever on the front end of the
But
property.
you're saying the issue for turning around is back here.
So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm out of my lane on here, and I don't, so initially it was, we have setback issues, and when a subdivision comes in or plat, whatever platting process this falls under, we normally take our half right away. Because that's how the process works, and the city's opportunity to manage that responsibility. So when we looked at that, we're like, man, this really gets into, like, it's cutting off their deck, it's putting it within 5 feet of their house, that's not normal situation that we face all the time. So then we had that conversation, and there was some back and forth, and I'm missing some pieces, but then then it came back up, well, why is there extra right of way on the southern end? And we think we're piecing it together where through the landowner, and what we could find was it was intended to maybe be an S curve there because of the existing houses, we're assuming, we don't know that for sure. And then the request was made, well, would you vacate that? You don't really need it, would you vacate it? I don't know what purpose it serves other than just trying to clean that up potentially, but maybe others can speak to that. And then when we got into the would you vacate it conversation, where my involvement was, well, if we 100% know we don't need it, I would say, sure, vacate it. The situation's similar to 70th and Kane, where we're not gonna build a road over that floodplain. In this situation, we don't know how we're gonna resolve this, and so as staff, it's important for you to know that, we're open to exchange, modification, whatever there is, even an easement, a road easement on the other side, if that was able to be obtained cost effectively and there was cooperation. We're open to any creative ideas and reorientate that, but we don't want to necessarily, I guess, recommend giving up a right-of-way if we don't have a solution yet, and we have kind of an existing problem. So that's my understanding and involvement of this process, so hopefully that clarifies, and feel free to correct me, but it's like one issue falls into the next issue, falls into the next issue, and this is what there's no formal application, it's brainstorming, but this is kind of the information we've shared, and I know Kendra had more than I can add to that.
I think that kind of where we're at right now is trying to resolve the easement issue, because we can't really move ahead to buy this if the easement kind of puts a stop to all of it. So if the easement issue could be resolved, then I would be putting in an application to do the purchase. And, we would have to get the surveying done, and I believe, I talked to Otto that had done the surveying back in the 90s. They checked into it. I think both properties have to be platted, and so there's quite a process that goes along with that, so.
You're saying the easement on the north property is holding up the sale of the that portion of
Correct.
view?
Do you mean the right?
Not the vacation.
Potential easement on the north property.
Yeah, potential road right-of-way easement.
Yeah, exactly, it's holding up the entire sale.
So I can't put in an application for wanting to buy this and get this process going without having this, settled.
Yeah. And a standard road right-of-way, 33 feet, you can't turn a truck around in that anyway, can you? That doesn't solve your problem with the truck turnaround.
No, but we can, so if we didn't take that now, we would be having to take more when the other property to the east develops, so normally we take from
each side,
so. Your answer is, if we took this, we might make minimal improvements, but it doesn't, it's positioning for a larger improvement later when the opportunity presents itself.
How do utilities run down that road now?
I don't.
Power line is on the,
Power line's on the east side.
right.
So there's no buried utilities?
No, when the pine tree went down, it snapped off the power pole on the east side of the road, and that's what started the whole deal that it cost.
Yeah.
There is not natural gas at the end of the road. You guys don't have access to natural gas either, yeah.
No internet either, I might add.
Working on it, working on it.
That is important.
We're working on it.
But those satellites leave a lot to be desired, don't they?
If you're a small road with small potatoes, they don't really have to come very.
Yeah, nobody cares, do they? It's,
So, oh, go ahead.
What's the minimum amount of road right-of-way you could take to, if you had to bury utilities and do utility work on the north side of the road? I mean, could you get with 5 feet off the road right away? Or the west side?
We would try to push it out as, to the extent we can, so we don't have to relocate it or deal with it. It's all site-specific, so we just have to look at it.
Yeah, I'm saying, what's the minimum? Not what you push it out to.
What's the minimum? We could allow it under the road if we want to. You know, it's our road right away, so eventually there could be sewer and water down there, and so.
That would all get.
In a new development, so I say this in, like Ravinia, right? We have, it can be 50 or 60-foot right-of-ways, collector roads, 80-foot right-of-ways. We keep all our public utilities, sewer, water, stormwater, in our right-of-way.
Yeah.
And then we get 10-foot D&U easements, drainage and utility easements, excuse me, on the outside of that. That's where we put the small utilities.
Right, that's what I'm thinking. The small utilities, if they put in buried power, if they put in cable, if they put in gas at some point, what's the minimum amount of space they could get by with?
Oh, you mean the space they would eat up?
Yeah.
If they went joint trench, you're 3-4 feet. I would think it would be hard to do joint trench in a rural setting, so you're probably a couple feet apart. So if there was 3 utilities in there, with 3 feet apart, you're eating up, 10 feet.
Yeah.
And all of those utilities.
And my guess is that they would even need more space than that, though, because of tree roots and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, ideally, we got drain tile in the road. I mean, so we'd have to do some, again, we don't have an application, so we haven't, fully analyzed this, but, I mean, yeah, we plan 10 feet on each side of the road for all small utilities in perpetuity, so.
Yeah.
Depends on when they come in. If they come in all independently, it eats up that space really fast. New developments require joint trench, so it's bundled, so we save more room for the future. So and again, you could put them down the middle of the road, that's just not advised, because there's relocation efforts and time for that. You could do that, it's just not part of our practice. So there's always, I guess, an exception, but in a general rule, we push those out of our way so we don't have to deal with them.
Not an easy issue.
No.
The impact though on, I guess, everybody is pretty minimal. Bottom's not gonna do anything with his space. I mean, you can think about 50 years in the future, but there's a lot of possibilities that could happen then, and I'm not sure you can plan for them quite that well. I mean, ultimately, it's just us 2 people on this little road that want to change the configurations of our property, and
Yeah, you're wedged in there pretty well. There's not a lot that can be done to address the underlying issue of the structures being really close to the road.
it's been that way for 100 years probably.
And I just don't want to build a new structure that isn't.
Set back enough to avoid the problem. Yeah, I wouldn't be worried about the legal non-conforming side of it with the setbacks that we can't fix. I would view it as a positive that you're moving your house farther away, so that at least one of the 2 now has the appropriate clearance. I guess I would be okay leaving the northern portion of Ebert Road the way that it is and allow the adjustment without requiring right-of-way there. I also, if we feel like we need to maintain current state, I would also be okay keeping the existing orange shaded area as easement for now until whatever the next step is going to be, to keep that option open.
Yeah.
But it's not, it doesn't run up right next to the house as of right now. It's.
No.
before.
It's just to the south, yeah. I can see that on the map.
Would it stay that the width it is, or would it go back to the 33 and a half, or whatever it is that it would technically call for?
I would defer to Kevin on that.
I mean, what we share with the applicant and what we're trying to share tonight verbally is we generally don't want to give up right away until we know we're not going to use it. So until there's a plan that we know we're not going to use it, we would recommend to keep it. And you guys could override that, but that would be staff's recommendation based on that we don't know. What we don't know, we can't project against. That's just a safe play. You guys could say we're being too safe, that's your discretion, but that's a safe play.
So how about,
If they came in, there was a development, and we could work it out where due to the curve in the road, we didn't need that, the landowner could come back like they did later and say, well, now that you don't need it, could you vacate it? And then we'd look at it and be like, yeah, we don't need it, let's vacate it, when we had a plan in place, right? If there's a better plan in place, we could do it. So it's all about preserving options at this point, and nothing more than that.
So is that easement 33 feet, or is it?
It's more than that.
40-some feet right now?
It's
It's documented that way and
Yep.
stuff,
Yes.
okay?
That's so we're not talking about in the orange area, we're not talking about taking more
Yeah.
than normal. They're requesting that we vacate some that we already have.
No, I understand, he keeps saying, can it go back to
Yeah, so
33
what he would
feet?
want us to
It's
do is-
40-some feet now.
Yeah. He wants us to vacate the orange so that it more complies with what we would take under normal circumstances.
but that's kind of a secondary thing. I would say if we just keep what we have for now as is, don't take that up the road, does that make it work for the sale?
Land sale could then move forward.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine, yeah. I mean,
And then,
Yeah, as long as we
Okay.
don't have to give up our part of the property
Mhm.
of our neighbor, we're fine.
gotcha. And then, kind of, I think what you're touching on is if later on came to find out that we're for sure never gonna need it, then you could come and ask for us to vacate it
Vacate it.
further, or make it more of the standard size.
And if something ever happened that you did go to the other side, then back, I guess the original plan would kind of still be there.
Right.
Because kind of what, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's the
Yeah,
only way it
because
could.
that's what's stopping the sale right now, is this part of Peter. So.
If we never take road right away on the top property, that's the only way the road could be adjusted in the future, right?
Yeah, or that whoever wanted to do that would have to go get rights to build a road there if it needed to be wider in the future, so yeah. Again, that's why with subdivisions, we generally take right away, that's
But wouldn't,
a platting process.
unless it was a big S road, wouldn't the only time that would happen would be if you guys decided to sell and develop your property, which we'd have another crack at it at that point.
Yes, or if the property across the street,
Or that, right.
I mean, at some point, they're probably gonna develop, but that's not.
You have cracks at it when somebody comes in with a plat.
His property will never develop further, though,
Probably not.
because you probably don't have any development rights on your property.
I don't know if these even are, but I don't think we do.
Yeah, so it's only a matter of if this property develops, at which point road right-of-way would be taken on that side of the road, and the road would have to be shifted.
Gotcha.
And to do like a typical section, maybe a little bit more would have to go on that side, but that could be disclosed at that time and they'd be aware of it, and that could be something that.
That's your
is
PUD
talked about.
negotiation.
There you go.
So I mean, there's a lot of options. Again, we're only trying to preserve options. So you guys can provide input that you don't feel like that's necessary to preserve anymore. That's your discretion.
Not vacating any of that, though, right now, doesn't impact you as far as building a house.
Yeah, because my new house would, technically, it will come further south and then back this way, so technically, it does give me less footage from where the house would be to where the easement, because I would be where the, part of this easement right here would be, that doesn't make any sense. So the old house is right here. So my new house would be pushed south and over, so I would be in the area here where this easement would be between me and the road.
But you would fit within the setbacks to be able to build your house?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I'd be for, and this is not binding, right, this is just opinion, but I'd be for not taking road right away up top and not vacating any easement at this time. And
Leaving this the way it is.
Yep.
leaving it as is, and if for some reason it doesn't work out in the future, we could look at vacating at that point.
I would,
So then it would give us the go-ahead where we could start the application for the land sale and get the surveying.
Right?
yeah, I'd be in agreement on that.
You keep, and sorry I'm belaying this, but you keep talking about losing your front yard. Your front yard is Ebert,
Yes.
Yes. And it's after.
but that portion that he's buying, you aren't referring that as your
No,
front
that's sort
yard.
of our back.
I'm okay.
Yeah, strictly speaking, our house is located.
Nope, you're fine. I got it.
Here.
I thought when she was talking front yard, I thought she was talking the parcel you're selling. So when you break these up, you will own how much land if that goes all the way across?
My line, instead of being here, would come
How
down
much will
here.
that hold?
Roughly 3 acres.
And you have, well,
Roughly
3 acres? Thanks.
Yeah, I'd probably be just short of 3.
Nope,
Right,
I'm not.
Pretty close.
uh,
Yeah, so.
It looks bigger than it is, so, thanks.
Okay, so I think we have
Are
a,
you both satisfied?
Starting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not
Excellent.
concerned.
awesome. Thanks, guys.
Good discussion.
Appreciate you coming in.
Glad we could help.
Okay, so can I,
Yeah.
I want to interrupt, this picture's up here. There's a pole barn on the east side of Ebert Road. Just think, it says,
Is that yours?
no.
Oh, okay.
I'm just, it gets brought up here in council all the time as to whether or not people should be able to have pole barns on property,
Yeah.
like in vacant property or
Without it
whatever.
having a home on it.
It's come up in the last year.
Was there a home before?
No,
No.
no.
There was never a home on that piece of
No.
property?
It's hard to know because it was owned by Rolf, what was Rolf's last name? I can't remember Rolf, but anyway, Rolf did own a property. He owned this whole property here, and it goes back a ways, and he had a house down here on Oakdale.
Yeah.
And so at one point, he owned that whole configuration. I don't know if he built this before he subdivided.
Yeah, that's the rub, because what the timing of it is, because there's a property down by me where there was a house and a building. The house has been torn down. The building is legal non-conforming, it can be there by itself.
Yeah, so, but you
can't just build a building without a house.
well, some people want to add that to the
There's people
code.
wanna do it.
Yes, and I just want to point out that
There was.
that is not it's not a good idea. It doesn't serve a purpose, but it can be an issue for break-ins. They don't necessarily care. I mean, it's a little different, when there's a house on it, rather than just somebody putting a storage building on it, because of they're not connected. I don't know. I think it's odd. It's,
Believe it or not, there was a lawsuit. I prosecuted on that, and I lost that one. He had to build his building there.
yeah, I would say, and go on record, that we shouldn't allow that, and people advocate for that all the time, and it doesn't make sense.
We are moving this square up to here next month with eminent domain, right?
Yes.
Pretty sure that's gonna happen. Yeah.
Too funny.
Need a big turnaround there.
Now, I will say, there are storage places, there's storage buildings, but they're connected to to my household. So,
And I shouldn't make light of that, given Wright Hennepin's.
I know, yeah, I'm,
So I
just,
apologize if that was offensive to anyone listening.
just check
I
your,
just was bringing it towards you.
check your brake lines before you go home.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. I'm going to say we take a 5-minute break here.
Perfect.
And then we'll wrap up with the last
Are we almost done?
Yep.
Okay, we'll take a 5.
He still needs to.